All right, we're here with State Senator Eddie Melton. Thank you so much for taking some time with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've had a lot to say about the issue of school funding. What are your thoughts on the budget plan that just passed the Senate this week?
Right. Well, first off, I think that the Senate version of the budget is significantly better than what the House version of the budget was with House Bill 1001. With House Bill 1001, we've seen a version that came over to the Senate that had a significant amount of dollars that shifted from traditional public education to expansion of vouchers. And history and data has shown us that over 90% of all Hoosier children are in traditional public education. And we believe in the Senate Democratic Caucus that the expansion of this voucher program will continue to take away from our traditional K through 12 schools.
Do you have any hope at this point, based on the rosier revenue forecast, rosier to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, or other factors, that some of this might still change between now and the end of session next week?
Well, I'm extremely optimistic. When we look at the revenue forecast that just came out minutes ago, over the biennial, we'll have nearly $2 billion in the state of Indiana. And that's thanks to the American Rescue Plan through the Biden administration that has allowed a lot of stimulus checks to get in the hands of citizens so they can reinvest into the economy. The expansion of unemployment benefits over the weeks, $300 per week. All of this has helped to rejuvenate our economy. And it's clear that Indiana is in a very strong position, even in the midst of a pandemic. But we have to be very wise and very strategic in our investments. And we know one of the best investments for us to make is in K through 12 and in our educational system. So what we proposed, the Senate Democrats, was over $600 million of new dollars into our school funding formula. That proposal, this is before the forecast came out, we projected that that proposal will get more new dollars into local school corporations to allow them the flexibility to provide teacher pay increases.
Do you see that as a potential likelihood now, even though you've been unable to get some of those increases into the budget? Is it at all possible now, with the higher revenue forecast, that you might be able to convince some Republicans to plus up some of those budget numbers for K through 12 public education?
Well, I think there will be no excuse for them not to. Being in the super minority, we have done all that we can to fight to be the voice of those that have been underserved, underrepresented, and have been overlooked. And a part of that population are our teachers. When you look at the last 2 years, the governor issued a report through his Teacher Pay Commission, and even they recommend what we should do as a state to allow locals to increase more revenue to their teachers directly. One thing that I sit on the school funding formula committee, and we had a hearing about several weeks ago, over 6 hours of testimony, and individuals were asking, we need more equity, we need more parity when it comes down to overall funding of K through 12 education. So this is the time to act right now. There's no excuse. We have the support of the federal government. We can't allow that to push us back in saying that we should not invest as a state in our own K through 12 system.
A couple other topics I want to get to. The governor has signed a police reform bill, and obviously that topic is again very much in the news this week with everything taking place in the state of Minnesota. What will this specific bill accomplish, and what more do you want to see enacted here in Indiana?
Yeah, well, House Bill 1006 is a historic piece of legislation. When we look at what's going on right now with the case of George Floyd and his death, and the most recent shootings and killings at the hands of Black people, at the hands of officers, this legislation is very timely. It passed both chambers unanimously. It had the support of nonprofit and grassroots organization groups, organizers. and had the support of law enforcement professionals as well. Looking at the banning the use of the chokehold was a significant piece of legislation that we had to get accomplished. And myself and my members of the Black Legislative Caucus here in Indiana, we were very adamant about this. We met with the governor, we met with his team, and we expressed the concerns of our constituents that we met with over the summer. So I'm happy that House Bill 1006, and we want to thank Representative Sturwald for his leadership on that. And this was a bipartisan effort. So the banning the use of the chokehold, allowing decertification of officers of misconduct, and providing more training, de-escalation training, all of these things are a step in the right direction. However, it's not the solution to everything. We know we deal with systemic racism throughout all levels of government, throughout all levels of the criminal justice and policing system. And these things have to be rooted out and addressed as soon as possible.
I want to ask you about the pandemic as well. What about the governor's handling of this crisis? Obviously, some last minute changes this week because of the pause in J&J vaccinations. The statewide mask mandate has been rolled back now. There's also this battle brewing between the governor and the legislature over the governor's emergency powers, a veto override vote today. What's your take on how the state has handled all of this?
Right. I think Indiana has done a fair job in addressing the pandemic. Let me first address that I don't support the override of the veto. Uh, I'm of the belief that House Bill 1123 and any similar piece of legislation that strips the governor of power during the pandemic or during a crisis is not the right thing for us to do. Um, I may not have agreed with everything that the governor has done in terms of the pandemic, but I do think he and his team have the best interests of Hoosiers in mind. And the way that we've approached it collectively as a state, I believe that we were learning as we were going. But giving these agencies, giving the governor, allowing them to maintain that power and flexibility and fluidity to address critical needs, emergency needs during the pandemic, to me is extremely important. I would rather have one person leading an effort versus 150 individuals in the General Assembly trying to dictate what to do during the height of a pandemic. So as we continue to encourage folks to participate in vaccination, as we encourage folks to remain mindful that we're still in the midst of the pandemic, I think we're sending a bad signal to Hoosiers and actually to the entire nation.
What would you have done differently? You had considered running for governor at one point. As you look back over the course of this pandemic, some of the decisions here in recent weeks, are there things you can point to you believe you would have handled differently?
Well, first, I will say that I've been in very close communications with the governor, and he has adopted a lot of the recommendation that myself and my colleagues have offered to him. But one of the things that draws strict concern to myself, as well as a lot of my peers and even constituents, was the easing up on the mask requirements in the state of Indiana. We've heard from other governors across the country in terms of maintaining that. And we don't want folks to get off guard. We don't want folks to get too comfortable in thinking that we're out of this storm, out of this pandemic. Even though we have an increase of individuals getting vaccinated, we don't want folks to get comfortable in thinking that we're out of the pandemic. So we still want to encourage them to remain in safe social distance and maintain wearing masks. So that would be the one suggestion I would give at this particular time and moment.
All right, a lot going on there as we get ready for the final days of the legislative session. State Senator Eddie Melton, thanks so much for taking some time with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.